Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon, particularly so late in the day. We have what we hope is going to be a really fun, exciting panel for you. The intent of it is to make it very interactive. So we welcome questions, comments. We're going to have some panel participation and hopefully audience participation, so all are welcome to join us this afternoon. Just to give you some background into the design of the program, this is focusing on perhaps what you'd call the softer skills when you look at practicing in an international marketplace. We all know that competition these days for new clients and maintaining existing clients is fierce and getting rougher every day. But an element of it that we're focusing on is not necessarily the technical expertise, but the things that you bring to the table aside from that expertise that show that you understand the client, you understand what's important to them, and you understand in a cultural context how to interact with them and how to work best with them. So we have panelists from all over the world, and my co-moderator is Terri Morrison. Terri has written 5 books entitled Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands. They're of varying degrees of severity in terms of weight. One of them focuses on, I believe, more than 60 jurisdictions around the world, and then she's got some more regional focus. And you're welcome. Terri was gracious enough to bring a number of books with her today that she'll be offering at a special rate for us this afternoon for sale outside. So we want to thank Terri for joining us today. And I'd also like to thank Alyssa Kearney for putting this panel together. We're certainly going to have a lot of fun with it. So we're going to start things off a little differently. You'll notice that none of my panelists are to my side, but we're going to start off by introducing each other and just looking from a cultural perspective how that may or may not vary when you look at a number of jurisdictions around the world.
Does anybody speak German in the room? Any German speakers? Nine? Yeah? Yeah? Would you please read the line in German for us that's underneath the English?
Actually, the only word.
You went to German class when you were a kid.
Born in German. Es ist nicht Silikon, eine Ziege, and why is that? That stuff.
Dankeschön, dankeschön. You're better than I. You're better than I. That is a quote from Goethe, who is obviously one of the preeminent German scholars. There is nothing more terrible than ignorance in action, which leads us to the next slide. When you go to different cultures, you want to abide by their sensitivities. Don't go and massage the leader of a G6. And of course, every president has made a faux pas. It's not just the Bush family. It is also true that Barack Obama was sitting in New York in front of a series of flags there, and if you notice, the flag from the Philippines is inverted, which means that we're at war with the Philippines. Fortunately, the president of the Philippines, President Aquino, said, that's okay, I understand it was just a brief faux pas. So it happens to all of us. Next slide, please. We wanted to start today by introducing everyone in the environment that's comfortable for their own culture. So Lisa's going to be a guinea pig for each scenario, and we're going to start with Asha. Would you come up, please? Now we're going to pretend that these two people have never met before in their lives. How would you normally greet each other?
Hi, Lisa, how much do you earn?
Okay, shake again, shake again. How far
So,
apart
are you married?
you?
I'm supposed to introduce myself like an Israeli, right?
That's right. How far apart are they, do you think? Getting further.
The next question would be a surprise.
You get a book. Oh, I brought these. 2 feet. He said 2 feet.
Right here.
Beautiful. Let's see. Okay, do it again. I'd say that's pretty close. And actually back up a little, Usha. Thank you. He's so friendly. 2 feet is right. That's the normal for the U.S. and I believe Israel. Now these are the regional editions. I wanted to give them away today. Which would you like? Europe, Latin America, or Asia? Asia. Asia. Very good. Thank you.
Should I take my seat?
Sure. Yes, please. What did you notice about that reading?
What did I notice?
From the U.S. perspective.
It was very bold and forward, and there are many places in the world that would never ask someone how much they earn. There are many places that it's acceptable to do that after you.
Could be in Asia.
And he was very gracious with extending the hand.
And nice smile, looked her right in the eye. How was his grip?
Very strong.
Very strong. Extremely strong. Is that always appropriate? Maybe not. We'd like to invite Young up next. Young is from South Korea. And would you greet each other? Oh, here are the cards. This is the place where you will learn how to exchange cards as well. And I'll go ahead and just ask you to introduce each other.
Put it in zip.
All right, you could never put it in your back pocket.
So I would generally say, nice to meet you. It's
Nice to meet you.
pleasure. How was your trip?
Very well, thank you. Yours?
And probably would then, in Korea many times there's a local version and then the international version. Doesn't matter, you don't need a Korean side, but then I would probably give it to her with 2 hands and also receive it 2 hands, say thank you, and then probably then go to
And if you were, say, Young is more important than you, so he bows, and you would bow, so you bow.
if I bow.
Yeah, and then we would bow a little lower. And then if he were more important, then we'd go even lower. So that's very gracious, and you're adapting to their environment, which actually President Barack Obama did with the Emperor Akihito of Japan when he greeted him, because first of all, he's elderly, and he gets more respect. And he was a senior. I mean, he is the 40-some in the line of Jimu, I think. So there are lots of people that actually go to Juku schools in Japan to learn about. It's very complicated. You don't have to be exact, but the fact that you make the attempt is helpful. What would you say in greeting if you had a first word in Korean?
In Korean,
Yes.
it would be 안녕하세요. Then again, I mean, you don't always ask about. We'll probably go over some more details and during the discussion. It's fine if you just shake hands, and as long as you're polite. And of course, seniority, since Lisa presumably is higher than I am, I would generally show my respect.
How was the grip, Lisa?
Very nice.
That's one thing about in Asia, sometimes people from the U.S. think that since the grip is gentle, that that's indicative of their character, that they won't be strong negotiators, which is the antithesis, right, of what you will find in many parts of Asia. So it does not belie character or strength of character, and you don't have as much direct eye contact generally.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
So thank you very much. Alakumi will be coming up, and she is from Nigeria.
Hi.
Look how close. Okay, hold that. How close are they?
Feet.
Feet. This is actually about 14 inches, a foot or less, right? So who said a foot?
I did.
You did. You did. Okay.
He gets peanuts.
Thank you very much. So I'm sorry. You go ahead then.
Yes, she's a woman, so it makes all the difference. Now, if she were a man, that distance would be like double. And if she were a Muslim woman, I would not dare shake her hand. And usually, Nigerians are friendly, they're loud, you know? So I would probably have been greeting you like a mile off. We like to be seen, we like to be heard, we like to make sure people know we're there. And that kind of, it happens in everything we do, including business ethics
The
but then-
communication, right?
Yeah, communication.
Mhm.
So she's a woman, makes all the difference.
Now, if
My
you were a
group would be
man
so
and a
happy.
woman, would you if it were, now northern Nigeria is Muslim, right? Is the
Yes.
southern as well, or no?
Well, you have some Muslims in the south.
Some Muslims.
Yeah.
So you'd best err on the side of formality
Mhm.
then.
That's it.
But you
That's
would
all.
not shake hands, for example, with Ashok without knowing, you know, whether
Well,
he was
a
Muslim.
Christian, westernized lawyer would
Okay.
shake hands with anybody.
Okay.
But then a rural businesswoman somewhere would be a little bit more cautious. If she were a Muslim, she would not shake hands.
Would she put her hand here and say hello?
Yes, yes.
That's a
Muslim,
form of
she
greeting.
she would do that.
Like this?
And so is that an appropriate response from the man?
Well, but this is the north. It's a Islamic thing, more than a cultural thing. So what the Muslims will do anywhere in the world, what they would do in Nigeria.
Just put your hand here and hello. Now let's pretend you're two men, just for a minute. And just because you know the Muslim scenario. May I have your paperwork? Because this is going to be interesting. So, these are two Arab men now. So you would shake hands here, and then you put your hand up on her shoulder, and you put your hand up on her shoulder, and then they would kiss each other on both cheeks. And then they would walk down the street holding hands. Now when I was, thank you, that was so great of you to go with that. When I was at NATO recently, they had all the military in the room and they'd all been to Iraq. And it's very hard for US military to abide by the sensibilities in Iraq. But they said, yes, actually, the military are used to now kissing the Iraqis. And when they want someone from Iraq to pay attention, they take the senior US military officer and they have it, you know, they're all in full regalia. They all look alike, you can't tell. But when they want attention, they have the gentleman who's the military commander take his helmet off. Why? Because he's gray. And he's got gravitas, because his hair is white. So all the Iraqis will gravitate to you because you're the smartest man here. See, so thank you so much.
That worked.
That was beautiful. What would you do?
Eye contact, woman to woman, I would look you straight in the eye. Man to woman, a little bit more cautious. I would not look you directly. I would just cautiously just glance at you and look at some other man in Massilo. So that's it.
Yeah.
That's what you get.
Well, when women look too long, their eyes are engaged too long, it conveys a different kind of communication, right?
Uncomfortable. The atmosphere, if it's business, you started off on the wrong footing. I'm
It could
afraid.
either be confrontational
Yeah.
or it could be too intimate.
Intimate, that's it.
Exactly.
That's it. Mostly
Thank you.
intimate.
Speaking of intimate, we're going to have Marcelo come up now. Thank you. I'm sorry about that.
I don't know why you said it.
Well, because he's Latino, you know, and he's from Argentina. So how would you normally, well, say you know Lisa already once, and so now you go ahead and greet.
Hi, Lisa. How's your day? Doing well? I probably kissed her once or twice, depending.
Once or twice.
And I
That's
touched her.
Right. Okay, so
Elbow. This one, okay?
We also actually do know each other well.
this is 6 inches. No, really. But, okay, so Brazil. I'm taking you to Brazil just for a minute because the first time I went to Brazil, my client stood literally like 6 inches away. So I would back up.
And he would go.
And at the end of the day, I had moved furniture. He came around. But it is helpful to understand why people do that. And just briefly, there are a lot of reasons why people stand in the proximity that they do. It's thermal reflective heat. is what sociologists understand, because if you read somebody's autobiography like Nelson Mandela, he was never alone until he was 13 years old. I mean, 7, 8 people in a bedroom.
Yeah.
So you feel reflective thermal heat. Here's a little exercise. Take your hand and turn the palm away from you. You have a tremendous number of neuroreceptors in the back of your hand and on your lips. So put your hand up to your mouth, close your eyes, and feel that reflective thermal heat. Now take your hand away until you can't feel it anymore, and then open your eyes and see what's the distance. So if I were in the US, this is as far as I can go. If I were blind, my hand would be out here.
Wow.
Because they're highly sensitive to reflective thermal heat. Different cultures crave different scenarios. So if somebody gets on an escalator right next to you in the Philippines, they're not trying to be intimate. It's not Manhattan. They're just standing where they would feel the heat. There you go. Gracias, señor. Okay, that's the intros for now. Thank you all. And now we're going to go ahead and actually introduce everyone themselves.
Yeah, just to give you a little bit more background about ourselves, my name is Lisa Ryan. I'm a partner with Fragaman in our New Jersey office. But I think the reason why I was asked to join the panel is I manage the U.S. operations of our global practice. So day in and day out, I'm not only working with U.S. clients, but with clients around the world, but also dealing with the interaction or the sensitivities between U.S. organizations interacting with more than 140 jurisdictions around the world, and just making sure that those sensitivities are forefront in our workings. Terri, I'll turn it over to you if there's anything else. Goodness.
Oh, my goodness. So I'm co-author, not author, co-author of many books. This actually our 9th. I did the Dun & Bradstreet Guide to Doing Business Around the World, too. We have a digital product that takes all the manuscripts. It's offered through McGraw-Hill. And you're all welcome to a 2-week free trial if you'd like to look at it. The new book that comes out this fall is on sales and marketing, and actually there's some legal aspects to it. It's also in the Kiss Bow series. And it's a pleasure to be here. Ashok?
Ashok. You can
Hello.
tell people if you're married and how much you have.
Yes, my name's Ashok Chandrasekhar. I'm a partner at Goldfarb in Tel Aviv. My practice focuses on mergers and acquisitions and venture capital investments and everything having to do with high-tech industry in Israel. I guess what's particularly relevant for me about this panel is that, as you probably figured out from my accent, I am born and raised in the United States, went to college and law school here, practiced law in California, and have now been practicing in Israel for 18 years. And so every day I'm encountering cross-cultural issues and kind of sitting on the cusp between mostly Americans and Europeans and occasionally Asian parties and Israelis, and trying to help them bridge the cultural gaps in order to get their deals done.
Young?
My name is Yong Lim. I work at a law firm in Seoul, Korea called Kim & Chang. I mainly do antitrust and M&A work. And currently I'm in Cambridge, up in Boston, near Boston, doing an SJD in antitrust at Harvard Law School. Many of our clients at Kim & Chang come from all around the world, including the US, Canada, South America, Europe, et cetera, and a lot of the clients ask us how they should react, what is the local norm, what is the best response, the best practice. And so I'm very excited here, and maybe, hopefully I'll be able to answer some of the questions you may have about doing business in Korea, and also probably in the general Asia area. Thank you.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Olufumilayo Oluyede. Now, they've shortened that. they put for me, I mean, this happens in everything I have with ABA. They put my name, still shortened, as Olufumi Oluyede, and then on top of it, they put for me. which is a lot more easier for them, I guess. I work for a law firm called TRLP Law. I've been in practice for 25 years. We're a commercial law firm with offices virtually everywhere, and that's because we have partners in virtually every country. Usually when we have cases in different parts of the world, we develop relationships with our lawyers, or the lawyers we work with, or we come into contact with, and eventually they come and forge a union with us under what we know as TRLP law. So TRLP law has offices, various offices in Nigeria. We have an office in Abuja, we have one in Lagos, we have one in Port Harcourt, we have an office in London, we have a couple in the United States, one in DC, and one in California, and Spain, and various parts managed by full-fledged, well-experienced lawyers who know the terrain. So whatever you need to get done, we have the personnel with which to make that happen. Now, the cultural part of it, I don't know if it's because I belong to TRLP law or if it's just me. I was born in London, England. I lived in England till I was, I think, 16. Then went back to Lagos. And I've lived in various parts of the world. And that kind of shapes your orientation about a few things. And you know a little bit about what goes on in different places, which is probably why I'm here. So I hope I'll be able to impart something. I hope you'll be able to go back and learn from my various experiences in business circles in the various places where I operate. Thank you.
Sorry. Hello, my name is Marcelo Bombao. I'm from Argentina, from the M&M Baum Law Firm. I'm the membership officer of the section. And my purpose here when I received Elisa and Lisa's call to be part of this is eventually to be able to share with you some stories that I have, not only based on the international clientele that I have as clients, where different stories can be told, but also because I am heavily involved in the media and entertainment area within my country and regionally, and the clients, even if they're from the same country, sometimes differ based on what type of business or industry they're in. So I look forward to being able to share some stories with you as we speak.
Great, thank you.
This slide is kind of interesting. I'd like you all to try a namaste. Might be the only time outside of a yoga class you ever do it. This is, I greet the godlike within you. And it's important and it's a beautiful way to greet each other because there are many cultures that do not touch between genders, whether it's Hindu, Buddhist, Muslim. I was interviewed once by Vogue because that was when the Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, was kissing Netanyahu and Arafat. And they were calling her the kissing ambassador because, you know, these are leaders of theocracies and that wasn't the most delicate way to approach the scenario. But anyway, here you see Gandhi doing the appropriate greeting. You see then Richard Gere in India at an AIDS benefit kissing Shilpa Shetty. He was hung in effigy. Arrest warrants were issued for him. And her career was pretty decimated subsequently, because that is a very normal Hollywood gesture, but totally inappropriate in Mumbai. The third is kind of a funny one, because that's, of course, the president, Hu Jintao, of China, and he is getting hugged by this guy who hopped up on stage and stuck a little green hat on his head, which means your significant other is cheating on you, and then gave him a big hug, which you really don't do that often in China. So there are lots of different faux pas you could commit in one fell swoop with that photo.
Sure. So I'd like to turn over to the panel and just talk a little bit about business cards and how you exchange them, whether the context differs depending on who you're meeting with. I know we did a little bit in the beginning exercise. But Ashok, maybe we could start with you.
Yeah, actually, what I would say about business cards and really about interactions with Israelis in general, both lawyers and business people, is don't be offended. Whatever happens, just don't be offended. So if you're in a meeting, and people are giving around business cards, and your counterpart from the Israeli team takes his or her card and kind of flips it across the table to you, don't take offense. It's a very, very informal place, and they're just treating you the way they treat their best friends. It's okay. So there's not a formal way that an Israeli would give a business card. They'll tend to just slap it down on the table or toss it across.
Do they write on them?
Not that I can think of. Is there
Like
something
if you-
specific you have in mind? Oh, you mean
You know.
if you give me your card,
And
do
you-
I take some notes on
Yeah,
your card?
yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Why is that a faux pas?
Young?
Well, I mean, in Korea and generally in Asia, you don't really want to throw your then again, I mean, I think this is probably an important point that I wanted to make. Not every Korean is alike, as not every American is alike. And so there are people who will be accepting at a thrown business card, and there are people who will be offended. And I think in Korea, you will be given a certain benefit of doubt being a foreigner. They'll understand. They don't expect you to be Korean. They actually expect you to not know the local custom. Now, one way to gain brownie points, though, is they will be quite, I suppose, probably appreciative if you give your business card, which is very often exchanged in the beginning, with two hands, or generally another way to do it is with one hand beneath another arm or the hand, and they'll be very pleased. So this guy knows, or this woman knows the local custom, and they'll like it. It's a show of respect, and it's not only done to your senior. I will often do the same to my junior or a partner, or even a student, so to say, who comes to our office and greets me for any other sort of non-business or business activity. So it's a good thing to do that. But then again, don't be worried too much. Even if you just give it with your one hand, they won't be offended. And then, but don't throw it.
Don't throw it like a deck of cards.
Really discourage you not to do it.
Just don't be offended.
There was, I wanted to ask, in Asia, sometimes people put the cards out in front of them in order. And I wondered, do you think that's in order of importance, or is it just the order you received it? And I've seen the gentleman who's the most important pick them all up at the end of the meeting, like, now we're done, and he picks the cards up. Is that true?
So generally, once again, there's no general rule that applies to every case. It will be done in accordance to how you are seated. So it's basically a flow chart, a seating chart that you set. It's particularly, let's say that you're in a meeting with 20 people. I would be surprised if you could memorize everybody at that moment. So what you do is, you kind of like float out, and it's in accordance with your seat. So don't be offended if you seem to be way down on that side. I mean, it doesn't mean that it's that they think lowly of you. Yes, and sometimes people will also write on your business card. Generally, it's just to remember what you've said or what you are, just to later do that. So you shouldn't be offended with that. I understand that sometimes it is offensive in the States, but in Korea, some people will do that, and it's not something that is forbidden.
Yes. Whatever you do, don't throw your cards. Give it.
I'm just going to stay in Israel.
Bring bring it out, give it, do whatever, but just don't flick, don't throw. It's offensive. And it's going to start you off on a wrong footing. I mean, they probably wouldn't say anything, but then you would have left an impression which would not augur well for business relations. And if you are American, and well, generally it's seen, you're expected to do things like that. So you want to kind of, well, Americans are seen to be forward, and you know they're all over the place. I mean, you know, so it's expected that an American would come in and flip their cards, and you know, so but then you want to surprise them. You don't want to go that way. you want to like do it respectfully, do it with some decorum. This is business after all. You're not relating to your best friend, so and that matters a great deal. I mean, if you've had time to develop a relationship, you can do whatever you like, but then that first impression always matters. You do not flip your cards. You do not throw your cards. You do not get too familiar. You just very cordially but business-like take out your cards, give it, and take it from there.
Sometimes people ask unusual questions in different cultures, like how much do you earn, or are you married, and so forth. And sometimes when I worked in a company, this woman took offense after she came back from Asia, because she said, "Oh, they're so rude, Terry. They just ask me all these personal questions." And I said, "There's got to be a reason for that, you know." And she actually lost business because she reacted poorly. Like, we don't answer questions like that in my So I went to the Chinese embassy and I asked them, "Why would you ask how old I am, or if I have children, and if I have male children, and so forth?" And he said, "Well, because, you know, you are working in a society that has strong hierarchical stature, and it's Confucius-based as well. So we have to know where you fit in the society, and the way we know that is how much you earn, how old you are, do you have children, so forth." And these honorifics do not translate into English, but we give you honorifics. So sometimes, you know, and we ask questions that are rude. I don't know if anybody here is from the UK, but sometimes people, oh yes, sir. So if I met you for the first time and I said, "Oh, hello, how are you, what do you do, where do you live?" Would that be offensive?
No.
No? You wouldn't mind me asking where you live?
No.
Oh, that's good.
No.
That offended someone once. That
Well, we're becoming more international.
right. So where do you live now?
But now we see there's a big world out there.
Well, he said to me blatantly, he said, "You know, it's a small country, and as soon as I give you my address, you know how much I make."
But do you think a lot of this is changing quite dramatically as the world goes through globalization?
True.
I think a lot of these stories where the people take offence are from the times where it was initially people going into countries for the first time and all the rest of it. Whereas now, everyone, it's an awful thing to say, it's becoming so much more westernized and understanding.
And
as
yes, it does
as
give
the
you
panel
an
have already said,
advantage.
you know, that if you do get it wrong, they kind of go, okay.
Yeah, you just
But-
learn.
But there are little tricks you can do that, as you say, if you do it with the two hands. But the other classic thing is to make sure you read the damn thing.
Read it. And that brings us to Marcelo, about names. I wanted to ask you about Argentina. Argentina has a different name order than the rest of Latin America, right?
Yes and no. We use a lot of nicknames, not in a business atmosphere, of course, but we usually during the first meeting, if the meeting goes more or less well, and you have certain eye contact, certain skin with that person you're talking to, male or female, you probably 2 minutes down the conversation, you would start calling that person by his or her first name, Pedro, Maria, whatever it is, and it would be like that from there on. When you're talking with somebody with gray hair like me, I find many people in my firm that they treat me with respect. You know, they treat me as usted. They say, I can't get close to you. Then it's in one's arm, in one's decision of, crossing that bridge and making them feel closer or not. Many people like to be treated like distantly, and they keep it that way forever. There are many couples in Argentina, at least, that they treat each other as usted, which is a very formal way. I sometimes think that they're playing a game. I can't but in a commercial relationship or in a working relationship, it is not unusual to find people with different ages. You here and I'm here.
Mm.
But it always depends on the elder person who wants to cross the bridge or not.
Mm. If I give you a business card and it says Señor Juan Antonio Martinez Garcia, how do you address him?
Depending. It all depends. I could call him Jose Antonio or Jose, depending on how our relationship goes.
Uh-huh.
Or maybe some people like to, if they have two names, they like to be called by the two names.
Mm-hmm.
I usually call them by the first, Mr. Garcia, for instance, or Martinez, whatever it was in the example.
Juan Antonio Garcia Martinez. You would call him
Mr. Garcia or Mr. Garcia Martinez.
Garcia Martinez.
Because
Garcia.
some people, it's their mother's name, and they want to have their mother's name attached to their. So
Right.
It doesn't.
In Madrid, it would be Señor Garcia, because that's his father's name.
That's his father's name.
Right. Okay. Sorry.
Now, can I just make one comment coming back to the business cards? We're somewhere between Israel and Korea. But one thing I'd like to add, and which would be really offensive, if I gave anybody a business card and we end the meeting and that business card is on the table and we're leaving, I hate that guy for the rest of my life. Don't forget business cards. Take them and throw them out. If you don't want it, but don't leave them on the table.
I guess by way of example, I work for a Japanese company, and I saw a multi-million-dollar deal canceled because somebody left a business card on the table.
Wow.
So it's a big deal.
Yeah.
It is. I think in any culture it's a big deal.
Yeah, agreed.
It's a three-dimensional extension of yourself, really, in Asia, in many parts. And so you don't bend it, you don't stick it in your back, you don't scribble all over it. And they have this, and I don't say it right, Meishi Horuda, this little business card holder, which I've been told when I go to Japan, I should go buy one, a nice one, and go get everybody's card and put it in there and then put it in my purse so that it looks like I'm preserving the little 3D mini you in a nice package.
So Terri, what do you think, in the U.S., for example, now there's all sorts of sessions on learning how to network and things like that, and very often the guidance is to write on the back of the card when you met the person, some connection, so when you reach out to them in another context to establish that relationship or drive it forward, there's triggers to remember who they are.
Right. So in Japan, the neatest thing I ever saw was at a conference. You know how everybody scans the cards, and in the convention you have thousands of these, and there's a whole order of priority of who you address, and you can put little notes right on the reader. But there's a gentleman that I met, and he actually sells a holder like a Meishi Oruda, but he has a little, it's like a Post-it. So you're not literally, you take the card, you turn it over, you put the Post-it on the card, so you don't write on the card. And there was some sort of, they thought that was an extremely gracious and thoughtful way to preserve the entity of the card, because you shouldn't scribble on the card itself, but you're not then. And so it was just a neat trick, a neat marketing aspect to it. I don't know that any of us can remember all that data just through mnemonic tricks or so forth. So I have gone back to my room and made copious notes I don't know if anybody else does this. As soon as I leave, they're out of here. So, do you have a suggestion?
I negotiated when I did my first deal with a Japanese company for a joint venture. There were several people, and what I learned from my Japanese colleagues is that when we would break up at the end of the evening and the Americans would go back to the room and collapse into bed, the Japanese all went into one person's room and they made copious notes.
The Chinese do that too.
And they also had, nobody ever told me this, but my perception was that individuals were assigned other individuals in the opposite negotiating team to find out specific things along the way, whether it was how many children you had, was your boss ever in the service, whatever.
And let me add, they also devote some time to study you so they can address you properly during the negotiation
Well, in
as it goes.
Right. In China, my experience has been, I think they knew what color my underwear was.
Yes, go
I
ahead.
actually have an interesting sort of bicultural experience having to do with China and Israel. I was involved in negotiating a very complicated deal at the end of last year with a large Israeli team and a large Chinese team. We spent 2 weeks just locked in a hotel, and what was intriguing was that the Chinese were trying to be more informal, to sort of be a little bit like the Israelis. The Israelis were trying to be very formal and respectful, to be like the Chinese. And it didn't go to extremes, but for instance, the Chinese were addressing the Israeli team by their first names, which everybody in Israel does. And people in Israel have first names that are like nicknames from when they were kids. Like our prime minister is called Bibi, which is short for Benjamin. And the Israelis were all addressing the Chinese as Mr. Wei and Mr. And so it was an odd little sort of interaction.
Was that helpful?
It worked pretty well. At least the negotiations went really well. Yeah, it seemed as though both sides felt as though they were trying to get along with the other side, and everybody was also very tolerant of the faux pas that came up. It worked. Yeah.
So can I just tell a story that has nothing to do necessarily with business, but it has to do with names and nicknames. At least in Argentina, and I think in many Latin countries, one has the possibility of calling his wife and his wife to one person, gorda or gordo. Very, it's very
fat.
It's fatty. That means fatty.
Fatty.
Gordo, gordita. And it's very common, and nobody gets. It's not an offense at all. One day I was at a supermarket, and my wife was buying something, and I was at the end of the aisle, and I say, "Gorda," calling her. There were 5 women. The 5 women turned around. Saying, "What do you want?" It has nothing to do with business, but
You get in trouble.
no. But the women laughed amongst themselves. Everybody calls us Gorda.
Yeah, please.
Yes, you have.
There was something that generally in Africa, the culture here of giving things out to the left, especially.
Oh, good point.
That's
brilliant.
Usually it's a sign of disrespect. You take your card and you take your left hand.
That's in the Middle East.
Yeah, it's your right hand. Especially if somebody is older than you are, of course, we dare not. And then generally in Africa, you want to greet an old man. You don't shake hands with old people. You don't like that. In some cultures, you like flat.
Oh, you like flat?
Oh, yeah. And in some, you greet this way. That's right. It's because Africa is the Japanese and the Asians. It's hierarchical.
Hierarchy.
Age, position, and things are well respected.
She's putting you in front of the camera. Here you go. You will get a greeting again.
Many people in Africa will see it as quite offensive. You want to give them something phone, you don't give with your left hand. You give with your right hand. And if it's an elderly person, if he's older than you are, it's always apparent when somebody is older. That you can say I'm older than you are, right? So you do this. Now to show that, yeah, it's, don't keep it. When you want to greet, usually shaking is not part of African culture. Generally.
Even among equals?
Among equals, they have other ways of greeting themselves. But usually shaking
But
is...
in business circles?
Of course, in business circles,
you shake.
that also you shake, but then you must be careful. If you're meeting the Oba of a place, the king, for example, chief, you don't, or a chief, big high chief, you don't shake. Even if it's your client. Yeah. Oh, you're welcome, sir. How are you, sir? Can you have your seat, sir? If he wants to shake you, he does. But you will be snubbed. If you are too forward, you should do it. Now we just look at your hand. What's wrong with you?
Maybe this is time for another brownie point, since the gentleman over there brought it up. So in Asia, I think many of you would have experienced the same in Korea. Often you will be invited to dinner at one point, and there will be either wine, soju, sake, beer, whatever. Often your host will give you wine, and generally you will see that they will do with your right hand. So, and then sometimes you may be expected, or then you reciprocate, but you do not pour with your left. So then generally, once again, it's good to do with your right, and then if you do this again, they'll understand that you're showing respect. So just a very easy brownie points. I think these are the things that you want to collect. Easy to remember, but if you do that, they'll appreciate that.
So, sorry, please.
I have a question about that. I'm negotiating a deal right now in China, and have been with those dinners and the wine, and the wine, and the wine, and then some more wine. And I'm not a big drinker, and every time my glass was empty, they're filling it up, and then watching me to make sure that I drink it. So another member of the negotiating crew actually started putting water in his glass. And the Chinese caught him putting water in. They were very offended. So what recommendations do you have from an Asian perspective about it?
Very, very good question. So I've heard also in Korea.
Maybe do you want to repeat it in case it didn't go briefly?
Oh, okay. I think the question was, okay, the mic? Is this better? So the question was, when you're served wine or even hard liquor in many cases, sometimes together with beer, right, often, and you just don't really like it or you can't take much more, how do you politely refuse, right? And you're not alone. Many Koreans don't drink as well. I think one of the wrong perceptions is that, okay, you have to be a heavy drinker to be a good businessman in Korea, Japan, or China. That's not the case. Yes, if you drink a part of your glass, they will refill it because that's, once again, it's etiquette. It's just showing respect. But that doesn't mean that you have to drink. So often what a person will do in Korea, and the same in China or Japan, if they can't drink a lot, they will first receive the first glass, sip it. Unless you cannot take alcohol at all, you will sip it and then put it down and later explain. I mean, you can just say that, well, I really can't take too much, or I can't really take much more. I really appreciate, thank you. But if, I'll tonight, I think this is enough. They'll understand. I mean, it's not going to blow your deal. So just explain, be forthcoming. But I would probably not do the water thing, because once again, it's as if you're trying to cheat them, right? I mean, that's one thing you never want to do. I mean, the best thing is you can make mistakes, but do not try to fool your counterpart or try to smudge something. Just be forthright, saying that, look, I'm a foreigner, I'm not really sure what I should do. I think I've had enough wine, yes, I mean, I think I'll just stop right now. But then again, you can have a lively conversation, so don't worry. I totally relate to you. Many of my clients have had difficulties as well. But don't worry, you can just politely tell your host that this is enough for me today, and then act as if you've had much wine, and then be very jolly, and everything's going to be fine.
Can I just make one question? It's interesting as a woman that you are in that situation because 10 years ago in China, it wasn't as accepted for women to drink, but now they actually have women drinking representatives. So it's changed so much. What a great job, right? But I'm sorry, so you were going to say?
No, I just wanted to get a sense from the other panelists. Marcelo, maybe you could shed some light on how that might play out in Argentina. If someone didn't want to drink.
I mean, no, first of all, in Argentina, you can get a refill once, twice, but it's not something so strong from the etiquette point of view that you always have to have your glass full. That doesn't work. Generally speaking, I think after the fourth or fifth glass, nobody cares about the glass of the other, which is also true. And if you say I don't drink, you don't drink. I mean, it's your problem. Nobody will take that as an offense.
More for me.
More for you, exactly.
On the topic of dining etiquette, did you have a question?
A few comments.
Yeah.
When dining with Chinese, I'm not sure if this also relates to Korea, but sometimes, especially in the way you would have to sit in the table. Second thing I noticed, it has to do with when they ask you to give a toast and they ask you to take the mic and you have to compliment your host. That was really shocking. The third part is the karaoke part. That's really tough because you can't read what's on the screen. So.
Not even after a couple of wines.
Have you ever asked for a song that you know on the karaoke machine? You can do that.
Okay.
Actually prepare a couple of, I don't care if it's You Are My Sunshine or whatever, some goofy song. The concept, right, is to participate. And usually I would say most karaoke have, go ahead, in English. Right?
Exactly that point. Yes, in Korea, actually a lot of Koreans go to these karaoke, we call them 노래방, and they sing pop songs in English. And sometimes they'll even be Japanese songs and in English so that you can just ask for it. I think you pointed out to a good point about the toast. Yes, you are generally expected to compliment your host. I mean, the perfect thing would be, we had a great time here, you're a lovely host, the food is good, and we're very excited, and we'd like to come back, and just those pleasantries. I mean, but yes, I mean, if you just stood up and didn't say anything complimentary, they may think it as an indication from you that you're not really happy about the negotiations or so. Just throw a few things in. Like, I think it's the same in any culture. Even in the U.S., I hear a lot of people at these dinners, and I think, I'm not really sure how sincere they are, but they'll say that, they're having a fabulous time. And so it's the same thing. But yes, I mean, you want to do that. That was a very good point.
There was a comment back there, yeah.
If you don't drink, can you ask for a glass of water? Is that appropriate?
So I think I'm talking too much, so I'll give a very, very short answer. Yes, absolutely. You can just say that I can't take alcohol, and ask for, it doesn't have to be water, you can ask for soda, and they won't be offended.
And if you extend that to, say, your diet, it precludes you from eating meat or whatever, I would advise before you ever go to this event that they've planned in South Korea and spent tens of thousands of dollars on an enormous banquet, you walk in and say, I don't like that fish or something. You want to make sure if you have any dietary restrictions or you can't drink alcohol, let your hosts know prior to your arrival so they don't invest tremendous. Yes?
Just regarding the point about drinking, well, I'm from Korea. I'm not sure if Mr. Lim will agree with me, but the way that, because I don't drink, and a lot of times what I find is that the whole pouring and receiving, it's more about the ritual. So what I will do is I'll say I don't drink, but I'll just take a little bit, and I just take the drink and then I lay it down and then I ask for water and I just leave the drink where it is. And I find that that works perfectly well because usually they'll just want to kind of like toast, and if I don't have anything, then it's a little bit awkward. And they're perfectly fine. Like they don't want to waste their wine either, so they'll just give me a little bit, and I'll just take a little bit, and it's kind of just showing that I'm willing to participate in the ritual, but I don't drink. And they've been perfectly fine with that.
That you would take a bite of the food as well, even if you didn't really like kimchi or durian or would try it, So anybody. So did you want to move the slide? We have some slides.
I'd like to turn, if we could, to the actual context of a business meeting, and perhaps if we could talk about the pace of the meeting and how that may differ culturally, but also, and I know we talked about introductions, but explore perhaps the difference in an introduction in person, whether you would call someone Mr. or Mrs. or what have you in person, and how that might differ if you're meeting them, so to speak, in email format for the first time. So Ashok, maybe we could start with you.
Sure. I mean, the question of how you address people in Israel is pretty straightforward. Israelis are very informal and address everyone by their first name, except when they're trying to behave like they're not Israelis, and like my team was in China, where we're addressing everybody by their family names. But if you're at a meeting in Israel, I would say be ready to try hard to be as informal and comfortable with the other people as you can. And in terms of the pace of the meeting, Israelis tend to get right down to business and to kind of go straight to the hard issues, and not to build a nice rapport. They're very practical. So.
Okay. Fumi, sorry.
Sorry.
Okay. If you were meeting someone for the first time, and well, let's put it this way: Nigerians love titles. If a man was a chief and you didn't know and called him a mister, that's a faux pas. If he was a high chief and you called him a chief, that could be offensive. So,
can I ask you a question? How can you find that out?
Do your homework.
Yeah.
Your homework.
Well, you probably would have to, CVs. Before you get there, find out about the people you're going to meet and who they are, what they are, what they
like
do.
If you've got local counsel in Nigeria, it's the sort of thing you could say to your local counsel: here are the people we're going to be meeting.
Well,
Can
you see, I was going to come
prep
to
us
that.
for that?
Yeah, I was going to come to that. If in a business setting, a lawyer to a lawyer, well, sometimes if you were meeting with an older kind of lawyer who is a chief, and you were much younger, it would be appropriate to call them by their chieftaincy title. I mean, we have the former section chair, Aaron Childhouse. He's a chief. I know he's a chief. And sometimes, even now, I find it uncomfortable calling him Aaron, because I know he's a chief. If you didn't, then that would be a different case. But then it's always a plus if you know they're titled, to call them by whatever titles they are. It's a plus. Will work out.
So he's a chief here, or he's a chief there?
Well, in 2009, is it 2009? He was in Washington, was it spring meeting?
Yeah, spring meeting.
Yeah, he was made a chief. He has the title Bamofin Bubobu of our land, which is the international law chieftain. And most of us from here, we find it, Nigerian delegation, we find it uncomfortable calling him Aaron. And I hope he gets used to it. Because it's going to get worse. It's not going to get better. We're never going to call him Aaron. So that's the way it is. If they have titles, find out it's a plus if you call them by their title names. If they have a title that's higher than the normal title, find out. Call them by that. It's a plus.
Now that you mention it, when we met Aaron yesterday.
Did you call him Chief?
No, I didn't. But some gentleman from Nigeria called him something that we didn't understand. And he bowed. Yeah, something happened that we were like,
he knows, he understands. They would either say Chief or Oloye. Yeah, Oloye is the word, the Yoruba word for chief. So that's what we call him. In emails, in letters, seeing him face to face,
more formal.
talking about him.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I wouldn't normally call him just Aaron. So that's it. And that goes for all the business etiquettes as well. That's what I think.
Do any of the panelists, let's think just about the email context for a moment. Does it differ at all? You know, if you haven't met someone in person and you're reaching out to them for the first time, what's your natural inclination in terms of addressing them in email?
My natural inclination would be to address them more formally.
Yeah.
Dear Mrs. Ryan, or blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
Then, when you have the feedback, you can start building from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you sign and you answer my email saying, oh, okay, nice to meet you, what? Cordially, Lisa, then it's Lisa, and then it's Marcelo. But first shot is, I don't know who you are.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you had.
I don't know what happens so much in other countries, but I know that if you are addressing a woman for the first time, usually address her as Ms. So-and-so, not Miss and not Mrs., because people take offense to implying that they are married and they're not, or implying that they are younger. Miss is like you call a teenager, Miss so-and-so. People call me Miss Frank a lot because I am, I guess, relatively young, but they should address me as Ms. Frank. And if they say call me such and such after the fact, then you call them whatever it is. But it's always Ms. Because I've had that happen a couple of times when people call me Mrs. or Miss, Madam, whatever. But it's just Ms.
In email, I think seeing the written, as a writer, the written word in front of you has more impact in many times than just having a person chatting with you informally. So, and it's never going to go away either, right? So err on the side of formality always. And the other idiosyncrasy is many cultures you don't know if it is a female or a male. So if you get a name and it's an extremely complex scenario, many cultures, their name is so important to them because they're patronymics. If you're an Al Saud, you come from the Saud family, which is part of Saudi Arabia. And if you're Hispanic, your parents, both of them, are in your name. And if you're an Indian, you can tell what belief system, Hindu, Muslim, whatever, by your name. So your name means a lot, and to macerate someone's name is a graver insult, I think, in some countries than in the U.S., which people always call me Toni Morrison, which is great. I wish I were, but no. Or they think I'm male, because there are male Terrys, and you just kind of roll with it. But in other cultures, it wouldn't be so funny.
So,
go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to throw out. So, what happens if you really can't tell based on the name?
I replicate it precisely the way that theirs is on their initial.
So rather than saying dear Miss, dear Mr.,
I say
you would
dear
say, dear
M.
Lisa Ryan.
Yeah, that's what I do. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry.
Google Images also helps. If you Google the first name, sometimes you get a bunch of pictures of men and you know it's probably
You're smart. I'll have to Google Terri and see what happens.
You verify. You still verify.
Is there a question there too?
Yeah, I wanted to refer this to Senor Bombal. In Latin American culture, could you address how you say dear in a letter or email? I speak Spanish, and I've had a number of non-Spanish speaking people send me emails that say, querida, or
No, querida is a bit.
No.
Probably estimado or estimada. That would probably be a sort of neutral. Querida is.
Closer.
It's closer, yeah.
And apreciado is for someone you're friendly with. Appreciate it.
Next slide. Yeah, sure. We just are going to breeze through a little faster. The only point on the last slide I was going to point out was the tea breaks. You take breaks in different countries, and if you're in an Islamic culture, figure out what time the prayer breaks are every day. You can do this on a app. You can find it on the web, and then prepare to have people leave the room, right, when it's time for them to go pray, and don't take umbrage at that. Okay, I'm sorry. So the Saudi flag is on the bottom right here, and every time there's a World Cup, you find all sorts of atrocious promotional items with the Saudi flag on a facet of a soccer ball. And Allah's name is on the flag of Saudi Arabia. So you can imagine the horror of someone receiving a promotional item of a soccer ball that you're going to kick with your foot, which is unclean in the Middle East. The U.S. actually committed this exact faux pas when 2 years ago we airdropped a bunch of soccer balls into Afghanistan for children. And we had the flags all over them. And all these little Afghan kids were getting soccer balls with Allah's name on them. So, unfortunate, but, you have to think, what am I doing? Vet it within the country. There are a lot of numbers and colors and symbols that are not just idiosyncratic folkloric beliefs. These are symbols and numbers that are significant in those cultures. And you want to have good flow of energy in a room, good chi or whatever you think. Set it up so that it's comfortable for people. Feng Shui is very well known, as is Vastu, which is kind of like Feng Shui in India, for real estate executives, because they know that to sell a house, you've got to have it feel good, right, and be auspicious. So there's lucky numbers. Number 8, anybody know why is lucky? Sounds like prosperity. It's an auspicious number in Chinese, in Mandarin. It sounds like a word for success. And so people in Hong Kong will actually spend tens of thousands of dollars more for a license plate with a lot of 8s on it. The Olympics started in Beijing at 8 seconds after 8 o'clock on 8/8/08. You had a series of 6 8s. If you want to make a client from China very happy, take them gambling in Hong Kong in August on the 8th. I mean, people will buy private planes and fly all over the world to gamble on auspicious dates. So that's the antithesis of this is the number 4, which sounds like death. So there's no operating rooms with the number 4 in China. In the new construction in Hong Kong, there's no 4th or 14th floor. So those kind of issues are significant. Any other numbers? Yeah.
8 means that to make you rich and successful. And we usually, we prefer 6. 6 means everything goes well. And 4 because so the pronunciation for Chinese 4 means die or dead. So that's the reason that we don't like 4. Yeah.
Very good. So 6 is also auspicious.
Yeah, 6 means that so you're lucky, everything goes well. So we prefer 6.
There's also, people have told me 5 is a good number because there's 5 traditional elements, 5 sacred mountains. So if you're in Java, which has 5 days in the calendar in Java, and that's part of Indonesia, if the 5th day of the Indonesian calendar coincides with the Javanese and the Gregorian calendar, which we have, they name babies, they open businesses, they celebrate. So numbers and 3s are good, I believe. For all of these things, you do a little bit of research, and it's amazing how valid it becomes in the near term. Colors may be significant. Anybody have any scenarios that happened to them because of an inappropriate color that they selected for a product or a website? Yes?
Just one thing. I think it's accepted a little bit more, but you shouldn't, like in Korea at least, you shouldn't write someone's name in red ink. And I see that happen a lot, and people are understanding of it. They're not going to like hold it against you, but it just kind of gives a bad feeling when you see your name written in red.
Do you know why?
I think it was because you would write the names of the dead in red ink. So.
Buddhists write the names of the dead in red. Yeah, exactly. When Lucent Technologies was developing their logo, remember it's kind of it was a red circle that was not completely conjoined, and it did not, I was told that some Koreans didn't like the logo because it looked like the Japanese flag, you know, the red circle, and it's subconscious reaction to some of these things. But if you have options and you're trying to market your product, why not pick something that makes you happy, that makes everybody happy?
There's a comment back there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we have a problem of color also in Africa. For instance, Nigeria, you write somebody's name with a red biro, it feels that you are condemning the person to death. So actually, we are filling forms and give somebody a red biro to write the person, or you write it yourself, the person is not comfortable with it. So usually it's only females also. In some other culture, you prefer a female to have a red biro in the list. Even among school, elementary schools, when they register students, they will use other colors, black or blue to write male ones, and then use red to write the female students in the enrollment form.
But to support him,
thank you.
In our educational system, teachers use red biro to show that you are failed.
Yeah.
And in the banks, at the time, you say your account in red or brick blue.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that is common to most people. So, of course, if your account is in red, it means you're a debtor. So,
yeah, debtor. Yes, you're in the red. You're in red ink, right? Right. I also was told that in Africa, I used to have a very nice red suit, and I wore. So you're laughing, eh? So I wore it, and they said, "Oh no, that you're a tart." They tried to say it nice, it makes you look like a tart, because women who wear red, you know, in some parts of Africa, it's either a color also of mourning, you know, they're sad, it's a funeral color, danger. So these things have significance. Moving quickly, we do have left hands and feet. I was asked, if you're left-handed, what do you do in certain cultures? Literally, you don't use your left hand. You learn to write with your right hand because it was used for hygienic purposes traditionally. So now you get why it's not appropriate to pass food with your left hand or other items. Flags are important. Make sure that if you're going to use them in any materials, it could be the flag of Mexico, it could be the flag of any. McDonald's had all sorts of issues with the flags that they put on those little placemats, you know, the paper placemats that you would then squirt ketchup on and ball them up and throw them out. And in Mexico, they were horrified that you're desecrating the flag with French fries and ketchup. So, you know, consider what you're doing with and some cultures don't consider their flag as, they don't revere it. So when a car company came to the U.S., the president of the car company was in Kentucky. We have 10 minutes. He accepted a U.S. flag in Kentucky, and then he didn't realize the significance of the flag, and he just sort of opened it up, looked at it, and then went to shake hands and dragged the flag across the floor. And you could hear the chunk of all of the guns. You get my flag up there. So you have to, we do it too, okay? It is just the same for us. So we have 10 minutes.
Yeah, there's just one item, and we were talking about this as in preparation for this. Just how do you handle holidays? You know, if you go, for example, I go to visit Ashok, and I don't know whether or not to say Happy Yom Kippur.
Don't say Happy Yom Kippur. Yeah. No, I think the key is if you know that you're going somewhere where there's a holiday coming up, do your research and find out whether it's a happy holiday or a sad holiday, an auspicious one or an inauspicious one. the Jewish calendar has a number of holidays which are not happy times. And if you wish someone a happy day on one of those holidays, it's very, very awkward. So, but this is something that just a few seconds research before you go would help in any culture, I'm sure.
So would your advice, Ashok, I mean, let's say someone neglects to do the research before they go.
Yeah.
Is it better to remain silent completely?
No. My thought on that is, let's say you're in a meeting in Israel and you know that tomorrow is Yom Kippur, but you don't know whether Yom Kippur is a good day or a bad day, and you frankly don't know what Yom Kippur is. I feel as though you can't go wrong by saying, oh, I noticed that tomorrow's Yom Kippur. Can you tell me about that? I'm curious what Yom Kippur is about. Or if it's a Muslim holiday and you're in a meeting, just say, tell me a bit about that. What is it that's being observed on this date?
Sometimes in some holidays like Ramadan, you can offend people by eating or drinking in front of them, though, because they don't. They fast all day, and they aren't real pleased to see you sitting there. I mean, they're probably going to abide by your sensibility, but it's better to do the research, as you say, sometimes prior to even scheduling the meeting. And of course, we all do many multinational meetings.
So I know we're mindful we only have about 7 minutes left, so we're going to start to go a little quickly through the remaining slides, but we wanted to talk a little bit just about communication styles. Some cultures are a little bit more aggressive in the way they manage the verbal interactions. Others come from a position where you don't say no regardless of the situation. But Young, maybe you could start the discussion?
Okay, so this comes up often in Asia, Japanese, right? You don't really know whether they're saying yes or no. Sometimes they're saying yes when they say no. Koreans are some people call Koreans the U.S. Americans of Asia because we're supposedly more direct, but yet again, not as direct as many of your counterparts in the States. Often, my advice is you generally will have a local counterpart, right? It could be your local office, the guys on your ground. Ask, and often remember that if your counterpart doesn't say no right away, where a U.S. counterpart would have said no, it doesn't mean yes all the time. So I mean, I've seen many clients, their hopes being dashed after they think that they knocked the deal down, and then after all, it wasn't really that successful. So once again, I think it's difficult. I mean, I don't think there's a way to master this. Even Koreans sometimes misinterpret each other. So the best thing is to listen very carefully, ask once again, and then remember that in these negotiations, it may take more than once, more than twice, sometimes even 3 times a trip. I mean, I think a lot of people that have gone to China or in Asia are nodding right now, and so it's a continuous, you have to really be able to understand the other person's language and on a personal level to really know what it is. But yes, so be careful. I mean, I've seen a lot of clients mistaken a yes for a real yes, which really wasn't a yes, but rather, well, okay, I understand you. Okay, I see your point, but I'll get back to you.
That point of how do you know when they're saying no was explained to me once by if Lisa says something to me and it's offensive, like, oh, are those your real teeth or something? I don't know, something preposterous. And I'd rather not reply. I would, in China, evade the question. I would say, oh, I'm looking forward to dinner. Or that was isn't this facility beautiful? That's how they say no. Or no, I don't think that's an appropriate question, or I'm not going to. So an evasion is very common. And also in India, if they say, oh, I'll try. If I invite you to an event and you say, I'll try, that's no, I'm not coming.
The head bobble in India is often no as well, because they avoid saying a direct no. That's true. So instead they give you maybe, yeah.
Well, I don't think this is no. Actually, I think this is more like an accepting that I'm listening. Yes, I hear you, which is what hi is. Hi, I hear you. Not hi, yes, I agree with you.
But in Bulgaria, they said no,
This is no. This is yes. That's right.
All the time, because they sit there and they're saying yes, but shaking their head no, and I'm like, no, I said. I said, no, I said, and they're like, yeah, I understand. I'm like, oh, okay. I think it's
It's a confusion. The Greeks do that too sometimes. Yeah.
It's like who's on first, you know.
Well,
I like to see that in a marriage proposal in China.
Yeah, maybe.
Forever.
No. What happened in one client environment, why I put in the no problem, it was the final negotiations in Asia, and it was a textile manufacturing scenario. The CEO from the U.S. was so thrilled this deal was going through, and every time that the Japanese client proposed something at the very end, he'd say, oh, no problem, no problem, no problem. And the Japanese ceremonial final contract, the guy got up and walked out because all he heard was no. He didn't know what problem meant. So he just heard no, no. So you have to think, take it out of your vocabulary, whether it's nyet, nein, whatever, because your little phrase doesn't communicate what you're trying to say. Sorry, go ahead.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about negotiation styles, and then we were discussing also, the concept of retainer letters. Is it appropriate? Is it accepted? Is it expected in some cultures? But Fumi, maybe you could give us your perspective.
About negotiation styles?
Negotiation styles and how how do you engage the client? Is a formal engagement expected? Is it something that develops over time that perhaps doesn't need to be memorialized all the time?
Usually, if you're negotiating, you're expected to straight out let the client know where you stand, and somewhere along the line, he's going to make an offer, and then you would make a counter offer, and then reach a compromise somewhere along the line. That's usually how it goes. It's called haggling. So this would be like business kind of haggling. So, but somewhere along the line, you will reach a compromise and move on.
Have you ever seen cultures where everything seems to be going perfectly fine, and then at the last minute you get these incredible demands?
Oh, welcome to Israel.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right.
That
happens to you?
That happens a lot. Sure. It happens a great deal. Especially when you think you can get a better deal than you're getting, and you have an offer already, and you think this man needs this deal, like he needs to breathe. So, so you take advantage of that, and you kind of like, okay, how about this way, or how about this